The arrival of the Anglo Saxons to Britain can be dated from 455 AD to 600 AD. Please have a look at the time, 455 AD to 600 AD. So they did not come on one fine morning. So different bands and different groups of these invading tribes, they started overrunning Britain over hundreds of years. So it was not happening over one day or a couple of days or maybe 1 or 2 years. So it has been hundreds of years of invasion. So now here is a map for you. I'll be showing you more maps so that you become very familiar with the whole movement. So this is Britain. This is Britain, and this is the European landmass, right? So these are the different areas from which these different tribes came and invaded and settled down in Britain. So in the last class we had stopped with the Jutes. You remember Hengist and Horsa? So they came from this place, Jutland. This is Jutland. So from here is parts of Denmark. So from here, slowly they came and settled in the southern region of Britain. So Kent is somewhere here. So this is the region in which the Jutes came and settled. And then you have the Angles coming from the southern region. So they came and settled in these areas. So we'll be looking into details into the kingdoms in which they settled, or rather the places where they settled, and they named the kingdoms based on their beliefs, based on their names. We'll have a look at that. And then you have this yellow line showing us the direction in which the Angles settled, and the red line is the direction from which the Saxons came and settled. So Saxons, they settled in the southern region of England. The Angles, they settled in the northern region. And one little corner of south was occupied by the Jutes. So the Jutes did not have a very big kingdom. So now again you have another map. It's more or less the same, which shows us the migration routes of the Saxons and the Angles. So again, Jutes from this side, they moved, they came, they settled somewhere here. That's Kent, southernmost part of Britain. Whereas the Saxons came from this land, from this area, that is around Germany. From Germany, they moved on to the southern regions of Britain. Almost half of the south of Britain was occupied by the Saxons, whereas the Angles, they came from the uppermost part, that is mainly Denmark, the region that we call the Denmark today. So from this region, Angles, they came from there and they settled in the northern or the upper regions of Great Britain. So this is a modern day map which traces different invasion and migration routes. So first we had the Celts, we have already completed that. The Celts, and then later you have the Germans as in the Germanic tribe. So right now in this particular class, we are looking at the Germanic invasion of Great Britain. So when we are talking about Saxons, Angles, Jutes, they're all the Germanic groups. And what happened to the Celts who were living here? They were pushed to the western side and the northern side. So they were pushed towards the western side and the northern side. So in the 5th century onwards, you have the Germanic tribes coming from these regions. These regions, as in you have Denmark, Germany, this region Holland, right? From these regions, you have these people coming and settling here. So this is the 5th century, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, like that, around 400 years or so. You have these people coming in batches, groups, and bands. Later, it would be followed by the invasion by people from Norway. We will be calling them the northern men. We call them the Vikings. That would come after this. So we are talking about the 5th century migration of the Germanic tribes. So again, if you have a look at this, you can see here, this is Jutland, that is northernmost area of Denmark, from where this group, this tribe called Jutes, they came at the invitation of King Vortigern, the two warrior brothers, Hengist and Horsa, and they came and settled in the southern region. Southern region, as in here, the Jutes settled here, which we today call, I mean, that time also they called it the Kingdom of Kent. Then you had the Saxons coming, the next group. So Saxons, they came from the upper region of Germany, so northern region of Germany, Holland, this particular area. From there, they traveled and they again went towards the southern region. So more or less the half of this Britain, that is almost the whole of south of Britain was occupied by the Saxons. Whereas the Angles again from Denmark, but a southern region of Denmark. From there, they moved on to the northern region of Great Britain. So these are the what you call kingdoms of the Angles. We'll be looking into the names, the place names, and even the map would be shown to you. So this is for your understanding, the migration route. So from these corners of the world, of the Western world, you have these different tribes slowly moving towards Britain. In the last class, we had seen the whole of the map of Europe and how these different tribes were overrunning the whole continent. They were moving in different directions. We saw how some of them went to Africa, some of them went to Rome, the other regions of the world, and some of them had moved towards England. We hadn't done that in detail. So this class is mainly about the Germanic invasion of Great Britain, wherein we are looking at the migration routes and where they came and settled in Britain and what are the kingdoms established by these invading groups or tribes. So one is Kent. We are already familiar with Kent, which was occupied by Jutes. So now after the Jutes, you have the arrival of the Saxons. So roughly we can put it at 477 AD. So the next band to arrive after the Jutes were the Saxons. So where did they come from? They came from Denmark, North Germany, and Holland. And again, just a reminder, remember Hengist and Horsa, right? How they came bag and baggage to settle and not to go back. So after that, you have this band of people called the Saxons coming from South Denmark, North Germany, and Holland. So what kind of people were they? They were these wild, energetic, battle hungry kind of people. So they came and settled in these areas with their kith and kin, with their people, relatives, friends. And what about the people? That is, the Celtic people already settled there in Britain. Not all of them could put up a tough fight against them. They tried to put up a tough fight, but they could not really withstand the might, the power of these invading tribes. So what happened to these people? The Celts, they fled to the mountainous north or the swamp-filled western region. So they went towards Wales. Some of them, they crossed to the western side and went to Ireland. Some of them went up to the mountainous north. That is the areas that we today call Scotland. And these people, the Saxons, they came and settled down in the southern part of Britain. We already saw that in the map, right? And they gave these settlements their own names. So the Saxons who settled in the southern region, the South Saxons, that area is called Sussex. The West Saxons, they settled in this particular area, which they called Wessex. The East Saxons, the Saxons who settled in the eastern region, that region came to be called Essex, and the middle region, it came to be called as Middlesex and Surrey. So these are, this is actually the whole picture of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom. So here we need to remember about the Saxon settlement. So we have already seen Saxons had settled towards the southern region of Britain. So which were the major or the main kingdoms of the Saxons? Essex, have a look here. Essex as in East Saxons. It's towards the east. Essex. Sussex is proper south. So this is Sussex. And towards the western region, the West Saxons, we call them the Wessex. So Wessex, Sussex, and Essex. And then also some region here, the middle region, but it was not a very prominent kingdom. So therefore, it does not find a place in the map here. Right? So this region constitutes the Saxon settlements or the Saxon kingdoms. Three of them in importance: Essex, Wessex, and Sussex. Now, after the Saxons, you have the arrival of the Angles. So the date is almost the same. I mean, maybe a couple of years after the coming of the Saxons. So where did they after the coming of the Saxons? So the Angles, they came from South Denmark, North Germany, and Holland. They had this leader called Ida. So they settled in areas called Northumbria, East Anglia, and Mercia. So these areas or these kingdoms are towards the northern region, that is the upper half of Britain. The lower half of Britain was occupied by the Saxons, the upper half was occupied by the Angles. And these were bigger in number, these tribes. The Angles were much larger in number. So if you look at the map, so you'd find that almost two-thirds of Britain was now occupied by Angles. So there were so many in number. So the land began to be called as Angle land, which with the passage of time came to be known as England, and from there you have the word England. So now you understand the history behind these place names. So it's from Angleland, you have the word England. Angleland becoming England, and then England. So these are the Angle kingdoms here. The Angle kingdoms towards the north. So you have Northumbria. This is Mercia, who's the biggest kingdom. Northumbria is also big. Northumbria, Mercia, and this corner towards the east is East Anglia. So these are the Angle kingdoms up north of Britain. So half of Britain, or like the whole northern region, was occupied by the Angles, the southern region by the Saxons, and one bit corner, this here Kent, occupied by the Jutes. So now again, if you look at the difference between these two groups, Angles and Saxons, both are Germanic tribes. Both are Germanic tribes. Angles are Germanic people. They originally come from this place called Schleswig-Holstein in Germany, and they settled in the northern region of Britain into kingdoms called Mercia, Northumbria, and East Anglia. Whereas Saxons, again, they are a Germanic tribe. They settled in the southern parts of England in the 5th and the 6th century. And it's again a repetition. So you have Angles settling onto the northern side and Saxons onto the southern side. The Angle kingdoms are Northumbria, Mercia, and East Anglia, whereas the Saxon kingdoms are called Essex, Wessex, Sussex, Middlesex. All right. So Saxons, they went and settled and called these places Sussex, Wessex, Essex, Middlesex, and Surrey. And Angles, they settled in Northumbria, East Anglia, and Mercia. And many of the Britons as in the Celtic people, the previous group of people who were there, Britons, many of them, they went and settled in the north and the west, and the rest of the people in that Anglo-Saxon area after becoming submissive to them. So they willingly or maybe unwillingly, because they had no choice, they started accepting these invading tribes and their leaders, and they settled down in those regions peacefully. So what happened to the Britons or what happened to the Celts? Many of them then moved towards the northern region. Many of them went towards the western region as in Ireland and Wales, and north as in Scotland. So they went that side, and many of them, they stayed back in these Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. And then you have another group of Britons, as in people with the Celtic roots, Celtic origins. They crossed the English Channel and they settled in this place called Armorica in France. And the place was overrun by Britons. There were so many Britons now in this place called Armorica in France that it began to be called as Brittany. Brittany, as in the land of the self-exiled Brittany. So I'll be showing you the map. This is Armorica in France. This is Armorica in France. So this blue band, it shows us the Celtic people. The Celtic people. If you remember the Goidels, the Britons, the Belgae, you remember all those tribes, right? And these people, they had lots of relatives across the water. If you remember all your history, the initial classes, right? So now, with the coming of these Anglo Saxons, they were pushed towards the west as well as towards the north. So this can be seen as something like a line of control, or where the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms ended, right? So this blue region was all occupied by the Celtic tribes, whom we now call the Britons. And many of them from these regions, they migrated or they crossed over the water and went to this place called Armorica in France. So there were so many of them that the whole place became a settlement of these people. So much so that the place is now called Brittany. So it's like a small Britain, a mini Britain. Brittany, the land of these self-exiled Britons. I'll take you through the settlements and maps once again. So this is your now British kingdom, only this much British as in the original inhabitants, the Celtic people. Rest all went to the Anglo-Saxons. So the northern region, Northumbria, Mercia and East Anglia went to the Angles. The southern region consisting of Wessex, Sussex, Essex, it went to the Saxons, whereas this region called Kent went to the Jutes. So again, you have another map here, which shows us the direction. It's more or less a repetition. So if you see it again and again, it will be imprinted in your mind. So you have the Jutes coming and settling in the southern region called Kent. Then you have, so here is Kent. So the Jutes from here to here. And then you have the Saxons from this particular region coming to this region, the southern region. And the Angles from this particular region moving on to the northern part of Britain. So again, a picture of the settlement areas. Here you have the picks and the spots and all. So they are kind of cut off from this particular mainland. And this region occupied by the Celtic tribes, whom we call the Britons, and many of them came over to this area in France, which is known as Brittany now. And this is the eastern region. Here you have this place, Wales. When you look at the history of Britain, whenever these different tribes would come and invade, we'd find that the Welsh were a very independent kind of a people. They never kind of acceded or never accepted defeat. So if you remember the Hallelujah victory, you remember the Hallelujah victory, right, which was fought by a priest on behalf of the Wales, and they defeated the Jutes, if you remember that, right? And later, when with the coming of these people also, the Angles and Saxons also, they put up a very brave fight, and they tried to kind of push these people away. So therefore, you can see that this particular region was more or less free of this Anglo-Saxon interference invasion, because they were really protective about their land and their customs and culture. And when you talk about the different leaders, the different kings, different Celtic kings who were there at that time, we don't have a very clear picture about the different kings. Maybe we just have one name here or there. So this is not to say that the British rulers did not put up a fight. Yes, they did. Of course, they did put up a great fight against these leaders from these different tribes who were trying to overrun the whole of Great Britain. We are not very clear about all their names. So there's one name that really stands out when you look at the history books. That is of Ambrosius Aurelius. And who is this Ambrosius Aurelius? We're not very sure who this person is. Is he a mythical person, or is he King Arthur. You must have heard about King Arthur of the legends. There are so many legends about him. So maybe this Ambrosius Aurelius is actually King Arthur. So King Arthur could be seen as an imaginative alter ego of this king. So maybe he is King Arthur of the legendary King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table. So it's believed that he had this band of 40 knights or so. They would go on different adventures and they would fight for the honor of the land. There are many stories about, and there are even many movies made about King Arthur. There were many legends, and these have been written down by Thomas Mallory much later. So he had put down all these stories together. It's called the Modern Day Arthur. So Thomas Mallory has actually helped us to get a clear picture of these stories. So we don't know whether it's a legend or whether this King Arthur of these stories is actually Ambrosius Aurelius. And there was a battle called the Battle of Mons Bodoni in 500 AD, in which the Saxons were defeated. And the defeat was so bad that for the next 50 years, they did not even dare to fight back. So maybe it was King Arthur or Ambrosius Aurelius. We don't know. We can only imagine, we can only guess. So here are some pictures of King Arthur and the Round Table. So he used to have these kind of conferences, merrymaking, but then these were all knights. You have this saying, right? Knights in shining armor and all. So all that dates back to this particular time, wherein there were these legendary men who were very, very brave in battle, and they would even lay down their life for honor. They would rescue damsels in distress. They would go and fight all kinds of dragons. Those are kind of wonderful stories that has been now passed on through word of mouth until it was put down in writing by Thomas Mallory much later. Now, talking about the western region, Wales, right? This region is Wales. Now, Wales had always been very, very independent minded. Even today, they use every opportunity to show their distinctiveness as well as uniqueness and how they are very different from the British. It's there in their blood, right? So now what happened was these people, they refused the Anglo-Saxon sovereignty. So many of these Britons as in the Celtic tribes, they fled the invasion of the Anglo-Saxons. They went and settled in this western region. So they fled west, and the region is now known as Wales. So they called themselves Cymru. Though it is C, the pronunciation is Cymru. They call themselves Cymru, and later this region called to be known as Cambria. Cambria, Cymru as in comrades, comrades as in friends, and this region came to be called as Cambria. And they were very protective about their poetry, religion. They were not happy with the Anglo-Saxons. So these disinherited people, they created their own way of life, literature, they're very close to nature. So all these kind of things can be seen in the literary as well as the artistic outputs of these people living in this region known as Wales. Like that, Ireland, across the water, you have on the western side this piece of land, Ireland. This was another stretch of land that was a refuge for the disinherited. So during the different waves of displacement, you have people always moving in these two directions, either towards the west or towards the north. So right from the beginning, right, with the Iberians being moved towards the west and the north, and later now you have the Celts being moved towards the west and north with the coming of the Anglo-Saxons. So, and to sum up, what happened to the Roman cities with the coming of these Angles and Saxons? The cities were all destroyed and they were in ruins. Why? Because these Anglo-Saxons, they did not really care for this kind of a life that Romans lived, the grandeur of buildings, luxury. They did not believe in all that. They did not care for it. Instead, they lived in these small, huts and log cabins. with the Spartan simplicity. So their philosophy of life is totally different. They did not believe in that grandeur and splendor that was the Roman way of life. And language, look at the language. What happened? Earlier, when the Romans were around, they had used Latin, and Latin was kind of getting mixed with whatever was being spoken by the Celts, the Celtic language, and Latin. But then, and Latin has a very sweet ring to it. It sounds very nice. It's supposed to be very soft on the ears. Every language has a particular quality, right? Acoustic quality. That is how we hear it and we receive it. So this civilized and very gentle tone of Latin was replaced by this new accents, the new Germanic accents. And what kind of accents were there? They were very harsh and guttural. Guttural as in the sound is produced from the gut of your throat, that is coming from deep. So the sound, kind of it sounds very harsh to the ears. It was replaced by the harsh and guttural Germanic accents, and over a period of time, nothing much of Latin or Celtic remained. So you have more and more Germanic being infused into the language spoken by the people. So you can see how language is kind of changing. So from Celtic and little bit of Latin, and from that you have the whole of Germanic. So from this, from all this history, we can say that the English language is Germanic in origin. And what kind of people were they? These Anglo Saxons, they were very clannish, they were very loyal to their leader, and they stuck to each other. They believed in sticking to each other as a clan, as a tribe, and they gave a lot of respect to their leader. So the rule of their leader was the law. And later, we'll see how these different laws developed into the English law that we know today. And when they settled, they divided land into districts for administration. So slowly you can see how the seeds of reform kind administration was being laid during the time of the Anglo-Saxons. So with this you have the beginning, you have the birth of the English race, which is actually a mixture of the Germanic tribes, the different Germanic tribes, and we call the whole land England.